everyone. It's now 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so we're going to get started with today's presentation. I just want to thank everyone for joining for our 2015 Sales Tax Holiday presentation presented by TaxWare, which is now a Civil Compliance company. My name is Becca, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Before we get to today's presentation, I'd like to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, our participants will be on mute the duration of the presentation, so if at any time you do have a question, please type it in the Q&A box on the right side of your WebEx panel. If there is time at the end of the presentation, we will host a Q&A session and we'll respond to them at that time. We do have a lot of people on today's webinar, so if we don't get to your questions specifically, please feel free to reach out to us individually. Also, our presentation is being recorded, and it will be provided to you along with a copy of the slides and a follow-up email from me in the next few days, so watch your email for that. I do want to let everyone know that our webinar today is CPE eligible for 1 credit in tax compliance. In order to be eligible to this CPE credit, you must attend the entire presentation and answer all of the CPE polling questions. If you adhere to these 2 standards, you'll receive a certificate within 30 days of today's broadcast. So this brings us to our first CPE required poll. It's, are you planning to apply for CPE credit for attending today's webinar? And that poll will be available in the bottom right of your screen. While you're answering, we're going to get started with today's presentation. With me today is Eric Wallen, Tax Counsel, and Matthew Kelly, a Junior Tax Counsel. Both are members of the tax research team at Civil Compliance. I will now hand the presentation over to Eric, who will start us off.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, and welcome to our Sales Tax Holiday Primer for 2015. Today, in our discussion, we will cover sales tax holiday basics, including a brief history of sales tax holidays, common exempt items, new and less common holidays. We will continue our discussion with threshold taxability issues, such as determining which items are subject to special sales tax holiday treatment and where exactly sales tax holidays are taking place. We will continue with how mail, phone, and internet sales are treated, the importance of timing and what retailers really need to be aware of. We will touch on other transactional issues that often arise in the course of doing business and how such things should be treated during the sales tax holiday season. Finally, we will conclude our primer with some frequently asked questions, tips, and a view of where we see the future of sales tax holidays. So let's begin our discussion of sales tax holidays at the most logical place, all the way at the very beginning. 1997 was the year of the very first sales tax holiday, and it took place in New York. I remember this time quite well because I grew up in New York, and, well, growing up in New York, you knew that a lot of families would on occasion, and especially before the start of the school year, travel to neighboring states like New Jersey, where they could purchase clothing tax-free at one of the many area malls. Other border states have lower sales tax rates, so the state of New York was losing some revenue to their neighbors. This first sales tax holiday in 1997 was a week long, and it took place in January. This holiday is applied to sales of clothing, and later this tax holiday would actually become a permanent fixture of New York law and apply year-round. So the sales tax holiday that took place in 1997, the exemptions for clothing are now in permanent place in the state of New York. And, well, sales tax holidays have come a long way since 1997. As of today, 19 states have at least one, and in some cases more than one, sales tax holiday. For example, Alabama, Texas, Maryland, and Virginia. And Virginia is kind of a special case because, as we'll see later, they have multiple sales tax holidays this year, but in the future, that's going to be condensed down into one sales tax holiday, which we will discuss a little more later. This year's newest holiday is back-to-school holiday, brought to us courtesy of the great state of Ohio. And speaking of back-to-school holidays, this reminds me, some of the most common items exempt during sales tax holiday season are related to school supplies, clothing, and computer goods, the type of items that people would normally purchase when getting their kids ready for the school year in September. And with the popularity and success of these types of sales tax holiday, new and currently less common holidays, and we'll talk about whether they're so uncommon these days, have also been created. And these less common holidays include Second Amendment holidays, hurricane preparedness holidays, and an increasingly popular Energy Star and WaterSense products holidays. This is a map, and looking at it for the year 2015, it tracks where we have seen a lot of the sales tax holiday activity. As many of you can see by just looking at the map, a lot of the sales tax holiday states are located in the southern tier of the U.S. The states here in green have confirmed holidays. Those in yellow have holidays where we have pending legislation. States like Florida and Massachusetts, these holidays have not become official for the year 2015, but there is legislation pending. Ohio is in blue because, like we said previously, in 2015, Ohio is the newest sales tax holiday. Alaska is in purple, and this is because Alaska only has sales tax holidays at the local levels, and this is for two boroughs, specifically in Alaska, Ketchikan, Gateway, and Kenai Province, or borough. And finally, Louisiana is colored red because there's pending legislation in the state of Louisiana which may drastically affect previously confirmed sales tax holidays, and we will talk about this in more detail a bit later on.
Okay, so this brings us to our second CPE question. Is your company affected by sales tax holidays? That poll is now open on the right side of your WebEx panel.
So some threshold questions we here at Sovos Compliance and our retail partners should really consider include what items qualify for exempt sales tax holiday treatment. Luckily for us, many of the states which have statutorily recurring holidays publish materials detailing how goods sold at retail should be treated during the holiday periods. Some states, for example, Tennessee, provide all-inclusive lists of goods. This is extremely helpful because some things are not always as clear as they seem just by reading the legislation. For instance, Tennessee exempts Halloween costumes for children, and this exemption for Halloween costumes falls under a clothing exemption. This wouldn't be immediately apparent just through a simple review of the enabling legislation. Another threshold question is which jurisdictions are participating? And when it comes to states' participation, this is probably the easiest part of the tracking of sales tax holidays, with the exception of those states that enact last-second legislation, generally like Massachusetts and, as we saw, Florida, where there's pending legislation. Many states, like Tennessee, have statutorily recurring holidays these days, and we generally know well in advance the holidays of when they're occurring and what the effective dates and times of those holidays are. Although determining when the state holiday is occurring can be an easy job, having sales tax holidays in states where they allow locals to opt in or out can be a much more difficult and complicated task. In states like Alabama, where they allow locals to pass legislation 30 days prior, it requires some tracking, and Louisiana and Missouri also allow opt-ins for their locals, and my colleague Matthew will discuss more on this a little later. As an illustration of what these all-inclusive lists look like, I've provided in this slide an example from the state of Tennessee where they provide guidance in an alphabetical listing of common goods that are subject to sales tax holiday treatment and the determinations that go along with these goods. We here at Sovos Compliance maintain lists in our sales and use tax enterprise system as well as our taxware enterprise system, which cover all the goods in these lists. Whenever states update their all-inclusive lists, we here at Sotos Compliance are on top of those updates, and we are able to offer very complete sales tax holiday coverage because of our constant monitoring of lists like this. And as we live in an ever more connected retail environment, internet sales, and to a lesser extent these days mail and phone sales, are an important issue to address. Unlike in-store sales, the key issue for sales tax holidays when it comes to internet sales is identifying whether the sale actually is taking place during the holiday. Most states take the immediate shipment approach, meaning that as long as the order is placed for immediate shipment during the sales tax holiday period, the sale will qualify for the holiday treatment. Of course, delays can happen. However, as long as the order is marked for immediate shipment and the delay is not caused by the customer, most states will uphold the time as marked for shipment as the time the sale occurred. In other words, back orders and other retail issues will not affect the timing of the sale. States like Kentucky, however, may require a bit more, such as order numbers and date stamps to confirm that the shipment was placed for immediate shipping. Timing of sales tax holiday transactions is an issue of particular importance since these holidays occur during a finite span of time. Holidays generally take place in the summer months, especially those geared towards the back-to-school shoppers. Generally, these holidays start at midnight and end at 11:59 on the final day that is in the legislation. In a state such as Massachusetts, specifically in Massachusetts, the time for the holiday is determined by Eastern Daylight Time statutorily. However, in a state like Alabama, there is a rule where the purchaser's time zone is the controlling time of when the sale takes place. And what this means is that retailers in Eastern time zones have some additional time when selling to customers in Alabama, at least when looking at it through the seller's perspective. Streamlined sales tax holiday member states adhere to the time zone rule, which Matthew will discuss in more detail a little later.
Eric, I have a question about timing. How long do sales tax holidays typically last for? Are they a weekend or are they a week? Can you speak a little more at the length?
Sure. So when I first started talking about sales tax holidays, you may have heard me say that in 1997, that first sales tax holiday was a week long. Since that time and with the popularity of sales tax holidays, most of these holidays occur during a 3-day weekend span, generally running Friday to Sunday. Of course, there are always outliers, but the general theme of a lot of these sales tax holidays is that they are for a limited time during a weekend. And just talking a little more about the Alabama purchaser's time zone rule, this rule for Alabama is unique to that state. Here you can visualize this Alabama rule. The sale would be exempt in Alabama, even though in Maine the seller might record the sale as taking place after the holiday. And whether this rule is an advantage for purchasers is up for some debate. Of course, nexus issues may apply and come into play under such transactions. There are many issues which retailers deal with on a day-to-day basis, and some of these transactional issues may be affected by sales tax holidays, others may not. For instance, discounts. Usually a state's general rule on discounts will not be affected by sales tax holiday rules, but retailers' coupons would usually be viewed as reducing the sales price in states where their sales tax holidays have threshold rules, and the manufacturer's coupon, on the other hand, would not reduce the sales tax threshold. So those are things to be aware of. As far as rain checks go, in most every state, rain checks issued during the sales tax holiday but used afterwards won't result in a tax-free sale. This means if you're going into a brick-and-mortar store and you get a rain check for an item, if it's not discounted and you purchase it after the date of the sales tax holiday, you're just going to be paying full price, so there's really no reason to get a rain check in that case. In many states, an item may be purchased over the phone or internet, and like we said, if it's marked for immediate shipment, then it will qualify for sales tax holiday treatment. So for those internet or phone retailers, you place something for immediate shipment, even if it's back ordered, the clients and customers will get that sales tax holiday treatment. Several states provide that an item may be marked for immediate shipment even if it's not currently in stock. As far as layaways go, some states such as Alabama require full payment for the item to qualify for sales tax holiday treatment. Other states merely require that the layaway deposit be made. Shipping and handling, especially for online and distance retailers, some states provide that separately stated shipping costs are not considered part of the sales price for the purposes of determining whether a sales tax holiday price threshold has been met. Other states require that the freight charge be properly allocated among items being shipped. What this means is if you're purchasing items that are exempt during the holiday and also some items that may be taxable, whether or not that shipping cost is taxable will depend on which items the allocation go towards. Use of products. While many states limit the benefits of sales tax holiday to personal consumption, there are a few states that specifically mandate that consumers get some sort of documentation or attestation that their purchases of high-priced items are being used for a non-business purpose. Certificates are generally taken in good faith and provide audit protection for retailers. In a state like Georgia, they previously did not provide an exemption for footwear and clothing that were used in a trade or business, but this has changed since 2014. It might have been too difficult to enforce such a rule in that state. Exchanges. Some states require that the items being exchanged for the same item, except you can get different size, colors, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same item. Obviously, the clear trend is towards a shirt for a shirt model. A lot of this is store policy in many places, so whether or not the state rule aligns with your store's policy may be something you'd want to look into. Post-holiday refunds in states like Massachusetts and there's other states which also have similar rules, but in Massachusetts there's a presumption that no sales tax was paid on qualifying purchases up to 90 days after the sales tax holiday. And that means without a receipt, the customer is not entitled to a refund of their sales tax. And if you live in a state like Massachusetts, where we border New Hampshire, which has no sales tax year-round, a lot of retailers will not allow you to refund your sales tax all year long without a receipt just because they have stores in the neighboring state without sales tax. And this provision is becoming very common, and like I said, the number of days may vary, but this is a provision that is definitely on the rise. South Carolina requires that all items, again, be purchased for non-commercial use.
So this brings us to our third CPE question. Has your organization made all the necessary adjustments to account for the 2015 sales tax holidays? And that's going to be open on the right side of your WebEx panel.
And now I'm going to pass this presentation on to my colleague Matthew Kelly, who is going to talk a bit about locals.
Thanks, Eric. So most states require that all their local jurisdictions participate in the holiday, but several states have different rules with regard to their locals. As we discussed earlier, Alabama allows cities and counties to participate in the holiday. They can adopt an ordinance or a resolution, and they need to do it 30 days before either the August or February holidays. Some locals in Alabama adopt continuing ordinances. Some will renew every year. Some participate never. We're going to talk a little more about Alabama and the difficulty with the locals, but brief summary, it is a bit difficult because there's no guidelines on when they actually have to notify the DOR as to whether they've accepted the holiday. Alaska has local specific holidays which are optional to the seller. For example, Kodiak has an optional holiday, but there are two mandatory holidays in Alaska. The Ketchikan Gateway has a sales tax day in the fall, both the borough, city, and the city of Saxon. In order for this holiday to become effective, all three jurisdictions need to pass legislation for the holiday and agree on the date. The other big holiday is the Kenai Peninsula. This is a holiday that spans a couple of months. It's a tax-free holiday on food, which runs from December 1st to May 1st, so it coincides with the slow time for tourism in that state. The next big local issue is in Missouri. Generally, participation in the holiday is mandatory for all locals in Missouri. However, if less than 2% of the retailer's merchandise qualifies for the sales tax holiday, participation is not mandatory. Additionally, retailers may offer a tax refund to customers who purchase qualifying merchandise if the retailer is not participating. This means that according to the Missouri DOR, that while the retailers are not directed to offer tax-free merchandise, a customer can demand their tax back and receive it. Louisiana and Mississippi both have special rules. Louisiana, much like Alabama, locals are not required to participate in the holiday, and in Mississippi, locals can opt in and out of the state and local tax anyway, so they can also do the same with the sales tax holiday. So we're going to talk about a specific holiday here, Alabama. Alabama actually has two sales tax holidays. One is a weather preparedness holiday in February, and they have a back-to-school holiday in August. So we're going to talk a little bit about the August sales tax holiday. This is what we would call a classic back-to-school holiday. It exempts clothing purchases under $100. This, of course, excludes, like most states, accessories, protective equipment, and sports equipment. Also exempts computers, computer software, and school computer supplies under $750. Along with that, regular school supplies, school art supplies, and school instructional materials under $50 are also exempt. Finally, books for non-commercial purposes are exempt. This, along with the majority, excludes magazines, periodicals, etc. So the big issue with this holiday, as we kind of teased, is the issue with the locals. The primary challenge for a retailer is going to be how to keep track of which locals are participating and which aren't. So there are approximately 500 locals to keep track of in Alabama, and they basically can decide they want to participate or not participate 30 days prior. They don't set a timeline as to when the DOR is not notified, and the typical way that the DOR is notified is via mail. So we run into situations where the DOR has received a letter from a jurisdiction announcing their participation a day before the sales tax holiday begins.
So, Matthew, it sounds like these locals in Alabama can really cause some problems when it comes to properly implementing sales tax holidays. And as one of the researchers here in the tax department at Sovos Compliance, how do you handle tracking these changes, especially when locals can opt in at the last minute?
That's a good question, Eric. So, it is a challenge in Alabama because the locals are all over the place in terms of how they're administered. Some are state administered, some are self-administered, some are third-party administered. So what we really do here as part of our general maintenance of the Alabama jurisdiction is we're in constant communication with all of those administrators, and as part of our ongoing process, we will reach out to each local to find out whether they're participating. However, the DOR in the last couple of years has been really great about keeping us up to date in terms of the list that they supply. But with that said, we still have to maintain a stream of communication with the locals, as well as using past participation to really dictate how we're going to handle them for the holiday. So what do retailers need to know for Alabama? Alabama is pretty consistent in terms of what is covered by the holiday. The DOR actually has up-to-date information and publications available for your use. As we showed with the Tennessee example, all of the items that are excluded or included are generally listed out in PDF documents on the website. The DOR has also been really great, as I said, in maintaining a list of who is participating and who isn't. They have been really good about updating it the day of notification receipt, and they provide last year's participating and non-participating locals list. So if there's any question as to whether a local will participate or not, again, we can use prior history in order to determine whether we would believe they would participate for this year. So I'm going to hand it back to Eric now. He's going to talk a little bit about less common holidays that we see here.
Thank you, Matthew. When we say less common holidays, this is a bit of a misnomer because these days these holidays are becoming more and more common. They're just not your traditional sales tax holiday for back-to-school items or clothing. The first holiday I'd like to discuss is these hurricane preparedness holidays. Us on the East Coast are well aware that hurricane season is pretty much upon us at this point. I think it may have started officially yesterday. I may be wrong on that. But hurricane season on the East Coast can tend to get pretty bad in certain years. And what states have started doing on the East Coast is allowing for hurricane preparedness holidays, and these allow various goods viewed as necessary and useful in the event of a hurricane to be exempt during certain periods of time. Usually these holidays occur earlier in the summer rather than later, where the sales tax holidays for back-to-school goods would occur. They cover items that you would generally find useful, like flashlights, ice packs, tarps, generators, coolers, batteries. Some states have imposed qualifying price thresholds for items. Other states have not done this. States generally have very specific lists of what qualifies as hurricane preparedness goods during these holidays. So what qualifies is generally not too much of an issue when it comes to these holidays. For the year 2015, we have 3 or 4 confirmed hurricane preparedness holidays, those being Alabama, Louisiana, and Virginia. The Alabama holiday as well as the Louisiana holiday have already occurred in the past few days. And as for Virginia's, it happened about a week ago. And as you can see by this slide, Virginia has 2 hurricane preparedness holidays. Technically, the one in August is part of some legislative reform in Virginia, which took all 3 of their sales tax holidays that currently existed on the books and basically condensed those down into a single holiday that takes place in the beginning of August. Another less common holiday that is becoming probably the most popular of these new sales tax holidays is this Energy Star and WaterSense products holiday, and these generally apply to qualifying Energy Star and WaterSense products, and these are things like air purifiers, refrigerators, high-efficiency toilets and shower heads, a lot of those items which have Energy Star stickers. These holidays may include installation and warranties depending on the state. Some states in the past, such as Florida, have included a single purchase limitation And the state of Florida did this last year because, well, it was intended to prevent landlords from going in and buying 10 or so refrigerators at without having to pay sales tax for maybe a bunch of units that they owned, because, again, sales tax holidays are intended to be for consumer use, and that would be more of a business use of these types of items. In 2015, we have numerous Energy Star and WaterSense holidays that have been confirmed in Georgia, Maryland, Missouri, Texas, and Virginia.
So, Eric, I have a question about the Energy Star and WaterSense holidays. Are all products that have the Energy Star sticker or WaterSense certification, are they included in holidays, or do states limit what type of products are eligible?
From what we've seen, most states include a very specific list of what goods are included during Energy Star and WaterSense product holidays. However, these lists are pretty large and include pretty much any good you would think of as qualifying under Energy Star and WaterSense certifications. However, there's always the chance that one or two items which do have these certifications may not be on the list, and it's something to be aware of. Finally, the Second Amendment holidays have been actually growing in number over the past few years. These holidays are called Second Amendment holidays in some states. Other states may have other names for them, but they're generally referred to as Second Amendment holidays, and they apply to goods such as firearms, ammunition for firearms, and hunting supplies. And depending on the state, hunting supplies may include archery equipment, archery cases, hearing protection, holsters, rangefinders. Some states include camping and fishing goods. Other states specifically exclude these goods. Currently, Louisiana and Mississippi have confirmed Second Amendment sales tax holidays, and they both occur on the same weekend in the beginning of September. Florida has legislation pending for a July 4th Second Amendment holiday, and Texas has one for at the end of August, which has legislation currently pending as well.
This brings us to our fourth CPE question. How far in advance does your organization prepare for sales tax holiday season? And that poll will be open in the right side of your WebEx panel.
I'm going to pass this presentation back to my colleague Matthew, who will talk a bit more about the Streamlined Sales Tax Agreement and its effect on sales tax holidays.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm going to talk a little bit about SST and how its requirements impact sales tax holidays. So Section 332 of the SSTA governs the administration of sales tax holiday for all members. Obviously, the members must comply with these requirements and can only exempt certain defined items. As far as notice goes, states have to provide notice of the exemption 60 days prior to the first day of the calendar quarter in which the holiday begins. So sort of a mouthful, but an example would be if you want to have an August back-to-school holiday, you have to provide notice 60 days prior to July 1. As far as thresholds and locals are concerned, thresholds, which are normally not allowed under the SST agreement, they are allowed during the sales tax holiday, and all local jurisdictions are required to participate in SST holiday members. Timing, whether or not a sale falls within the holiday, is based on the time zone at the seller's location. With respect to mail order, items must be ordered, accepted, and paid for and marked for immediate shipment during the holiday, so they follow the majority approach there. As far as layaways are concerned, either final payment or selection by the customer and acceptance by the customer of the order for immediate delivery upon full payment must occur during the holiday. Coupons and discounts. Coupons will reduce the price for threshold calculation, so the seller is reimbursed for the value of the coupon. So manufacturers' coupons do not count. However, retailer coupons are allowed to reduce threshold calculations. Rain checks. The rain check must be exercised during the holiday. Rain checks merely issued during the holiday will not result in tax-free holidays. So again, following the majority approach here, Returns, the same presumption as the general rule in Massachusetts, but it's a 60-day window. Exchanges, you have to have a similar type of item in order to obtain post-holiday benefits. You can change some of the features around, such as color, size, or feature, but you still need to be exchanging a shirt for a shirt. And shipping and handling, so a bit of a lot here, basically. The requirements for shipping and handling under the SST are very detailed. Delivery charges are always considered part of the sales price unless the state defines otherwise. If all the items delivered are exempt under the holiday and fall within the relevant threshold, then the entire package will be free of tax, including the shipping charges. However, if some of the items inside the package do not qualify for the holiday, there has to be an allocation on a per item basis, either via price or weight. To the extent that delivery charges are allocated to the taxable items, then those charges become taxable. So shipping is a bit complicated in the SST approach, but when you look at it, it does follow the majority of states.
Matthew, would you say that Streamlined Sales Tax Agreement basically codifies the most common sales tax holiday rules we see out there, and is this helpful?
Yes, so the SST agreement does capture the majority rules across the country for sales tax holidays, which is great in that it provides some sort of uniformity. However, the majority rules aren't necessarily the least complicated of rules, but in terms of providing a collective uniformity, it is great for that.
So it provides predictability, which is good.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm going to give it back to Eric one last time, and he's going to bring us to the end of our presentation today.
Okay, so some sales tax holiday frequently asked questions. We're going to go over these and talk a bit more about some core questions at the heart of sales tax holidays in general. Do sales tax holidays really increase sales? While I'd like to give an affirmative yes, the real answer is possibly. Studies in this area tend to show that holidays may not boost spending but merely shift the timing of purchases. According to a study done by the Tax Foundation, there's approximately a 4% to 7% increase in sales, and this may or may not be a big deal for some retailers. Other retailers may see it as a very big deal. And when it comes to shifting the timing of purchases, if you're in a state like we are here in Massachusetts, part of the reason that the legislature often holds off on enacting sales tax holidays at the same exact time every year is to leave that thought of unpredictability, so customers aren't aware of the exact date of the sales tax holiday. It's harder to plan for them, and therefore it hopefully in theory would reduce the amount of shifting purchases that may be made. What about negative impacts on tax revenue? Sales tax holidays basically have been shown to have little to no effect on overall tax revenue collection, and studies have shown that the impact is very minimal, 3% at most. And I mean, this isn't really a big deal as far as the DORs are concerned. If you're in a state like Louisiana, which we'll talk about a little later, this issue has been causing some problems in the legislature as far as whether or not they're going to be having sales tax holidays in the future. What about economic relief and job creation? Any jobs created by a sales tax holiday are likely temporary because sales tax holidays only take place for a very limited period of time, generally only over the weekend. So while you may not go out and hire extra staff, you may staff up with your existing staff for those sales tax holiday times. And as far as economic relief, while sales tax is known as a regressive tax, the savings are both on low and high income shoppers. So there's a benefit to all consumers and not so much a business benefit there. what complexities do retailers face? Well, one of the major complexities that a lot of retailers will face is having the labor to cover the increased foot traffic that sales tax holidays can often bring and often do bring. Inventory management issues is another issue which comes up from time to time. In those states where there's recurring sales tax holidays, retailers have notice well in advance and know to get their inventory in line with the increased foot traffic, and this helps for advanced planning in those states. So why are sales tax holidays as popular as ever if they don't give any noticeable increase anywhere as far as revenues for states or possibly retailers? Well, it appears more of a political football. A lot of politicians like to enact sales tax holiday legislation because, well, who likes paying sales tax? I mean, most consumers are not going to turn their noses up at the chance to save some money, and it's sponsored by politicians, and it's a win-win for them. And in states like Massachusetts, where there isn't a statutorily recurring holiday, they get to pass this legislation every single year.
So, Eric, I have a question. So that's, is there any public good that sales tax holidays pass on? For instance, the weather preparedness holidays, that seems like a good reminder for states that are affected by hurricane season.
I think in certain instances, sales tax holidays are definitely a good thing, especially when you're talking about the hurricane preparedness holidays, because when it comes to holidays such as your back-to-school holiday, it almost acts as free advertisement for businesses and retailers. And so when you're talking about hurricane preparedness, it gets that awareness out there. In fact, I had read in an article recently that some people in Florida were a bit upset that there hadn't been a hurricane preparedness holiday this year as of yet. And they said that these holidays serve as a reminder that hurricane season is upon them and that they should be stocking up on goods. So it definitely can serve as a public good. And in fact, those Energy Star and WaterSense holidays, I mean, those products are definitely good for the environment, so it serves a benefit in that sense as well. Some tips for retailers that we have is to get involved early. And when we say get involved early, we're not just talking about being prepared for a sales tax holiday that you already know is occurring. We're talking about getting in on the ground level. A lot of departments of revenue have notice and comment rulemaking which they employ, and retailers would have a great interest in helping form the policies that are implemented during sales tax holidays. Maybe we would see less of these threshold rules in some of the holidays if that happened. Be fully informed of the holidays. So read everything you can that the Department of Revenue's publish. And in those states where it's a statutorily recurring holiday, there is a ton out there to pick up and read. And in a state like Tennessee, they set up a state website specifically catering to the sales tax holiday time of year. And stock up and staff up. So if you know the sales tax holiday is coming, make sure you have the staff to cover it and make sure you have the inventory to cover it, especially for those brick and mortar retailers. Because if you're an online retailer, it's not as hard because, as we said, all you have to do is mark things for immediate shipment in most places, and the sales tax holiday savings will be passed along to the clients. And maybe even consider adding retailer discounts. This could possibly increase foot traffic in those brick and mortar stores, as well as bringing customers to your websites if you're an online retailer. And finally, we'll talk about the future of sales tax holidays. More and more legislation is being enacted every year, making sales tax holidays permanent recurrences. In a state like Connecticut, they are going to be adopting a form of their sales tax holiday clothing rule with slightly different thresholds, but it's definitely modeled after the sales tax holiday, and that's going to be taking place in July, I believe. States are hosting multiple sales tax holidays within the same taxable year, such as Alabama and Maryland. There are also states like Virginia where they're taking those multiple holidays and condensing them into one. New states like Ohio are continually jumping on the bandwagon of sales tax holidays because it is a big political win for politicians. People like saving money, and saving money on sales tax is a win for those politicians, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And finally, I really wanted to touch on Louisiana and what's going on there. It's not on this slide in particular, but at the end of May, there was a hurricane preparedness holiday in the state of Louisiana, and we had been closely monitoring legislation that was going through the state House and Senate, and luckily it stopped in the Senate and didn't pass during the prior to the hurricane sales tax holiday in Louisiana, and currently it's being debated in the Senate. Our most recent update is that they want to save the Second Amendment sales tax holiday in the state of Louisiana, so they want to leave that in place while cutting out the future of the hurricane preparedness sales tax holiday as well as the back-to-school sales tax holiday. Now, the sponsor of that bill, we are being told, is looking to just pull the entire bill because he doesn't see a reason why they should have a Second Amendment sales tax holiday and then cut out both hurricane preparedness and back-to-school holidays. So it's possible that those two holidays go away, but as of today, it looks like that possibility is slowly shrinking.
So we did just have one more survey question, and that was, would you like to have a sales representative from Silver's Compliance contact you? And that will be open on the right panel of your WebEx. We do have a few questions. First is, I hear that Michigan and Washington State were planning a sales tax holiday. Have you seen anything on this?
I can speak to Michigan. The Michigan legislation is still pending. They try to put it forward every year. Michigan hasn't had a lot of legislation passing through with regards to sales tax. If you recall, the ballot measure for sales tax increase was voted down by the population, so there's not a lot of movement in terms of any sales tax legislation currently in Michigan, but we are aware of the plans for that, and we're keeping a close eye on it. Eric, I think you can speak to Washington.
Yes, as far as Washington's concerned, again, this is legislation that has been introduced, and whether it gains traction or not, we will be monitoring. My thought is that it's unlikely to occur, and if it did occur, it would be really kind of surprising, as if you looked at the sales tax holiday map earlier, Washington would be the first state in the West to enact a sales tax holiday, and I'm not sure. It's completely possible that this does occur, but from what I've seen, there's not much traction there in the state of Washington for a sales tax holiday.
Okay, our next question. Can a person living in a state that does not have a tax holiday buy something online from a state that does and benefit from the tax holiday?
I'd imagine it really depends, because if you're in a state where there is no sales tax, like New Hampshire, then I would say yes, probably you could benefit from sales tax holiday treatment if you're purchasing from a retailer in one of those sales tax holiday states. However, if you're in a state where there is a sales tax, then there's the whole issue of paying use tax on that transaction, and most states are destination states, so if the customer is purchasing from a retailer out of state, the sales tax, or in this case use tax, would have to be collected from that state.
The next question was, are there restrictions to online advertising for sales tax holidays?
As far as advertising goes, one of the major restrictions that I've seen in terms of sales tax holidays is you can't tell people that you are going to pay the sales tax for them. As far as whether you there shouldn't be any restrictions as far as advertising that there is a sales tax holiday occurring for online retailers. However, you need to be sure that you're following all the rules as far as Nexus is concerned. And when it comes to advertising, we live in Massachusetts here, and we conduct our business in Massachusetts, and there are retailers in this state who have gotten penalized for saying they're going to pay the sales tax for customers. The rule is you could say you're offering a discount in the amount of the sales tax, but you can't outright say you're going to pay the sales tax regardless of whether the holiday occurs or not. That's where a lot of retailers have run into issues.
The state itself actually advertises the sales tax holiday pretty heavily here in Massachusetts as well.
Exactly.
Okay, and the next question was, why do you think so many states do not offer a sales tax holiday?
I mean, honestly, there's definitely that idea that sales tax holidays don't really produce any sort of economic benefit. In a lot of states, their neighbors have sales tax, so it's not really like they're competing with border states. In states like Massachusetts and New York, they are often competing with states that are right next to them, and people in the Northeast and can definitely travel very easily to neighboring states to save some money, and they often do. So in states like that, in states like Massachusetts, it makes sense to have a sales tax holiday. In other states in the West, where most of the states have a sales tax, they're not really competing with their neighbors so much, so it may not make financial sense to do so. But politically, it's always a win. So, I mean, there's definitely a chance that over time you'll see more sales tax holidays because, I mean, we haven't really seen a decrease in that area.
And then our last question is, does the taxware sales and use module exempt tax on shipping when the order consists of a product code that fall under the holiday?
It's going to depend. If they would like to contact me or Matthew specifically, we can get back to them with a more detailed answer.
Yeah, that depends on the state rules primarily. As we talked about in the presentation, you know, SST states have certain rules, and then some states have different rules for shipping. So we can definitely provide information on us if you have questions about a specific state.
Okay, so I want to thank our speakers again for the valuable information, and also our event today was been recorded and will be available to you along with a copy of the slides in a few days. So that concludes our webinar. Thank you for joining and have a great afternoon.